You're looking at a EUR/USD 4-hour chart, and in this video I'm going to show you how to place support resistance areas on this chart. The 4-hour chart is perfect for picking support resistance areas because it smooths out price nicely. Think about it this way. With a 1-minute chart, you see every little piece of price action throughout a day. And with all that data, it's almost impossible to place support resistance areas. However, when you go to a time frame like the 4-hour, price action is smoothed out and you only see the important price action. So you only see the big bounces and the big sideways movement. You want to only concentrate on the big bounces and the big sideways movement. So I always use the 4-hour chart to place my support resistance areas. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to be placing some support resistance areas on this 4-hour chart. Like I said, I use the 4-hour chart because it smooths out price action and it's easy to see where the big bounces are. I'll then be dropping down to the 1-hour chart just so I could refine and confirm the support resistance areas I place on the 4-hour chart. I'm going to explain to you why I'm placing each support resistance area. That way you begin to understand the process of placing them and you can place them on your own charts. So let's get started. I usually start from the bottom of the chart and work my way up. The first thing I do is just take a quick look at the chart for some bounces that sort of line up. And we can see some bounces that line up here, 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 and here. Some nice, strong bounces. You can see this one's a very strong one. Starts up here, bounces away nice and strongly. These all kind of line up, so we'll throw a line there. We could move it down a bit so it rests on the bodies of these two candles. And that looks quite strong. I mean, it has 4 pretty much direct bounces from the line. It's a nice strong buy area, an area of support. So I'm going to place this as a support resistance area. Okay, next one up. This is not as obvious, but we've got a small bounce here, small bounce here, a nice strong wick here, bounce here, almost a bounce there. Keep in mind this is the 4-hour chart, so when you drop down to the 1-hour chart, bounces like this one right here are going to look a lot more significant. And we've got almost a bounce there. Nice strong bearish candle, indecision candle forming at the bottom, and then a reversal. So these all sort of line up. Let's throw a line in and see what it looks like. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now this is clearly going to be a support resistance zone because we're not getting those precise bounces. Down here, we're getting precise bounces from this line. This one, the wicks did break below, but the bodies bounced precisely from the line. So this can remain a support resistance line, whereas this is more of a zone because we're not getting those direct bounces. I mean, sometimes the bodies break below slightly, especially here. So we could place the support resistance area here, but we'd probably mark it as a support resistance zone. Okay, so next one up, we've got some pretty clear signs of resistance here. I think it lines up with this point here too. Nice strong bounce here. And it seems to line up with this sideways movement here, this bounce here, kind of general bounces through here. Maybe even this bounce here, possibly this one here, actually, this nice strong wick up in this area. And just by eye, it looks like it lines up with this sideways movement here. Okay, so let's remove these boxes, throw up a line and see how it works out. Actually works out perfectly. Check that out. We've got some nice resistance up here, acted as support on the way down. You could see that the price had trouble breaking it for 2 4-hour candles. So on the 1-hour chart, that would look a lot more significant. Nice strong bounce here. We've got a few wick bounces here. Again, on the 1-hour chart, this may look a lot more significant. Obviously held the price back here. And here we could see that after it broke, the price came back down. And again, on the 1 hour chart, this will look a lot more significant. So that is a nice, strong support resistance area. Okay, so next, it looks like we have a lot of support here and actually a lot of resistance up here. The support at the bottom here seems to line up nicely with this bounce here. Maybe even possibly this bounce here, but I kind of doubt that. So let's remove these boxes real quick. We'll throw a line in there. See, that's too low if you want to place it on these bounces here. See, that looks a little better because here we can see that we're placing it based on this bounce and then this sideways movement. So this area of support here. On the way down here, it kind of carved straight through it, but remember, that's going to happen sometimes. I mean, the sellers were really strong on this downtrend here, and sometimes they're just going to carve straight through our support resistance areas, and it'll look like the support resistance areas are not valid, but a lot of times they are very much valid. So you should never completely ignore bounces like this and sideways movement like this. Okay, so we'll keep that support resistance area there. Next, looks like we're going to have to place it up here in this resistance. We could see that the bulls pushed up here. They had a lot of trouble breaking for several hours. Keep in mind, these are 4-hour candles. So this is several 4-hour candles. Just a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's 13 4-hour candles. That is just over 2 days. So this is not a small time frame. This is a big time frame. For 2 days, it just bounced against this area of resistance continuously. So that tells me that there definitely is resistance there. I mean, if this was a 15-minute chart and it bounced against an area of resistance for this many candles, it wouldn't be as significant. But this is 2 days where it just continuously tried to break here and it couldn't do it. So that tells you that there are sellers there, and they were not letting the price go up. Eventually, the price did go up, but it went down significantly first, bouncing off this support resistance area we have down here. So you're going to notice that these two lines here, they're quite close together. So when you get something like this, you just mark it as a support resistance zone. Because they're so close together, you can't really mark them as 2 separate lines, so you just mark it as a support resistance zone. Okay, so next, I have not changed anything on this chart. I've only dropped it down to the 1 hour. Now, the 1 hour chart is extremely useful because it gives us more price action information than the 4 hour chart. By price action information, I mean that we can more clearly see how price action reacts to our support resistance areas. This is because on the 4 hour chart, these 4 candles would be condensed into a single candle, so price action would be smoothed out. On the 1 hour chart, these candles are obviously in smaller blocks, in 1 hour blocks, so we can see how price action reacts to our support resistance areas more clearly because they're split up into smaller blocks. So I'm going to use this 1 hour chart just to improve the accuracy of our support resistance areas and to make sure they're placed well. Okay, so I'm going to start with our bottommost support resistance area. As you can see, we have several bounces here. This one broke below before reversing and coming back up. Now that tells me that this needs to be a support resistance zone. So I'm going to quickly change this into a support resistance zone. Now, I get asked a lot of questions about support resistance zones and how they differ to support resistance lines. The truth is the difference is very slight. Support resistance lines are slightly more accurate because they tell me that I should expect price to bounce from a specific level, for example, the 135.50, as opposed to an area such as the 135.50 to the 135.40. As for how price reacts to them goes, or trading them, there is pretty much no difference. They are really just a visual cue for me, so I know that I should expect price to bounce from an area instead of a specific point. I'm also often asked about these boundary lines that are placed around the center line and how they are placed. I usually just look to place them along the wicks or the bodies of candles. Honestly though, I never bother to make them perfect. More often than not, I just throw the boundary lines on and they end up about 5 to 8 pips on either side of the center line. Okay, so moving on, we've placed the support resistance zone here. Now let's look at our next support resistance area. This seems to be placed quite well. We can probably move this down slightly. It's really just a little neater down here with how it fits in with the bottom of the bodies here and the top here. But that's the only real difference. I didn't even really need to move it. I just like to keep my support resistance areas a little neater. So I just moved it slightly. So I'm going to change this into a support resistance zone too. Because it needs to be a support resistance zone, as you see, some candles have bounced from it and then formed along it, and some candles have closed below it. So we're not getting any specific bounces from this line every time. So we'll just quickly turn it into a support resistance zone, just so we know to expect bounces from anywhere within this small area. There you go. So next line up, this line seems to be placed pretty well. We don't need to move it. Again, we need to change this to a support resistance zone. You can see how a candle is broken above it, closed, and come back down. So this would be better as a support resistance zone. Most of these are going to be changed to support resistance zones. It's really only when you're placing these lines on your daily charts that you're going to get more support resistance lines. So we'll just throw that down there. There we go. Now this was defined as a zone on the 4-hour chart. So we already know this is a support resistance zone, and that's because of the sideways movement we got through here. So all we're going to do is make it look the same as our other support resistance zones by placing a center line here. There we go. So that's how you place support resistance areas on your chart. I know it may seem a little daunting for new traders, but if you just jump straight in, follow the guidelines I mentioned in the previous video, you'll get used to it very, very quickly, and soon you'll be able to place support resistance areas in your sleep. But like I said, I can understand that this is a little daunting for new traders, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the forum or in the comments section below this video.